second grade. Today we're going to add color to our spider web that we made last time. Now some of you might have had time to use a little bit of these watercolor pencils. I only had time to do a little bit over here, so I'll show you what that looks like when we add water. And then we can also just start using watercolor paints as well. So what you're going to need is your cup filled halfway to share with your neighbor, your messy mat, your artwork with your name on it, check to make sure your name's on it, and then the watercolor paints. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your paintbrush and you're going to get it wet. If you wanted to add a little bit more watercolor pencil, you can do that first. Just make sure you ask Mrs. Hedesheimer for the watercolor pencils. They look like this, and they look like regular color pencils, like I said last time, but they have a golden paintbrush on the side. So make sure you put those back in the container that Mrs. Hedesheimer gives you, and you do not mix them in with the regular color pencils because these are special. Okay, so if you have any areas that you use watercolor pencil like I do here, you're just going to get your paintbrush wet. You don't need to get any paint or anything. You just get it wet, and then you tickle the paper with the tip of your paintbrush. As you start to tickle the paper, you'll see that your paint that you created with the watercolor pencil starts to activate or wake up. Then you can kind of spread it out. So you didn't actually need to color to a level 4 last time because we can fill in the color today. Now each time you do one color, so I just did some orange, you're going to want to get some new water and kind of push the paintbrush down to the bottom of the cup to get that orange off of your brush. That way you don't contaminate your other colors when you wake them up. So if I didn't clean my brush out, this yellow would have looked like an orange yellow because the colors didn't mix together. So what I'm not doing is I'm not getting my paintbrush wet and just going over the whole thing. If I do that, all the colors are going to mix together. Instead, I'm working carefully to tickle the paper in one area at a time and fill that one area in. Now, if I have an area that I know is the same color, like this was brown, and this is also brown, I can jump over to this section and activate the paint over there. But then I'm going to clean my brush again. So I'm going to continue doing all of my watercolor pencil areas. Okay, now I did all of the areas that had watercolor pencil, and I can tell that some areas worked better than others. Like this teal color might have actually been a regular colored pencil, and I didn't notice because it didn't really blend the color at all, versus you can see the green blended very well. Now remember, I outlined my spiderweb with an oil pastel or a Sharpie. Those two items, oil pastels and Sharpies, don't like watercolor paint, so you can paint right over top of those lines and you can still see them. See here? So I'm going to go ahead and fill in the areas that didn't work and all the other areas I didn't get to with watercolor paint. So to use watercolor paint, you need a palette like this, and it might look really dirty, and that is okay. It's okay that it looks dirty. You're going to use your water to wake it up, and when you wake it up, you'll kind of clean it off a little bit. So like this orange is really dirty, so we'll use that one first. I'm going to get my paintbrush wet, and it doesn't have any other colors on it, and I'm going to tickle my orange paint until I start to get a puddle. Now this puddle is getting a little gross because the paint was kind of gross. So I'm going to clean my brush, do it again, and kind of clean off those other colors that were on there. That looks better. Now that I have a puddle of like a colored, I like to call it a colored rain puddle, I'm ready to use it. So I'm going to take some on my paintbrush and I'll pick an area that I want to color in. Let's say I want to color in this area. So I can paint right over top of my oil pastel lines, and I'm going to take my time. My paintbrush is a ballerina. It's dancing on its tippy toes. It's not scooting around on its butt because nobody wants to go to the booty scooting ballet. So that means I'm taking my time and I'm tickling the paper like a ballerina is tip on her tippy toes. I'm not doing this. That is the booty scooting ballet. We don't want to do that. We're going carefully. Once I do a couple areas with orange, I can clean my paintbrush and get a different color. Now, if you don't clean your paintbrush, the colors are going to mix together. So we need to make sure to clean our paintbrush really well. If your paint looks really dark and goopy and oopy and not really like a puddle anymore, that means you need more water. So sometimes you might need to put a little bit more water into your paint if it starts getting goopy. It should be like you're painting with a rain puddle, like I said. All right, so now let's try another color. I'm going to clean my brush off by pushing it down against the bottom of my cup. And even if you think it might be almost gone, like this blue, usually there's still a pretty decent amount in there. So I'm going to use what's left of this blue here, this turquoise blue. I'm going to make a rain puddle, so I'm tickling the paint until it gets nice and wet, like a rain puddle, and then I can use it. So I'm going to try it out down here. Ooh, that looks so nice. So I'm going to be a ballerina and use this blue. And you might notice that your paintbrush gets dry. So if your paintbrush starts to get dry, let me show you. Let's see what happens when I start painting over top of this blue. If I start running out of paint, it'll look like this, scratchy and dry. That means I need to either get more paint or I might need to ask for a refill on this color because now it's starting to look like it might be almost gone. But I have a little bit left here. So I can ask Ms. Hedgehog for a new color, but I'm going to go, or a new blue, but I'm going to go ahead and start using another color. Now the purple looks almost black before you wake it up. So check to make sure it's not black first before you use it. When you start to tickle it and wake it up, you'll start to see the color a little bit better. Remember, you're going to use a lot of water and a little bit of paint. Now that is a dark purple. If your paint is too dark or too wet, you can take a paper towel or a tissue and kind of just dab it. You just dab it and lift up, dab it and lift up. And that makes it a lot lighter and it kind of dries it off a little bit if it's too wet. So I'm going to go around my entire spider web and I'm going to fill in all of my shapes. All right, boys and girls, I decided I think I want to go in and finish the rest of mine with a marker or a colored pencil just because I like to mix things up a little bit. So if you would like to do some areas with marker or colored pencil, that is totally fine. Just take a look at your painting. If any of it looks really shiny or super dark, you're going to want to take your paintbrush with just some water on it and blend it out a little bit because if you let your watercolor paint be shiny and really dark, sometimes it gets really sticky. So if it doesn't feel like a rain puddle when you're painting with it, you're going to want to spread out some water and maybe dab it a little bit with your paper towel or tissue first. So I'm going to go ahead and color this in the rest of the way with some colored pencils, crayons, or markers just to make it a little bit different, and I'll see you at the end. Okay, guys, here is a finished one that I did, and I used a little bit of colored pencils, a little bit of watercolor paint, and a tiny bit of marker. So I have a little bit of everything, and it looks awesome. So next time we come in, we're going to make a spider for our spider web. I'll see you then.